It was one of those bright mornings when everything seemed normal. The school hallways were filled with chatter, laughter, and the sound of shoes squeaking against the floor. Students hurried to their classes, holding books, water bottles, and snacks they weren't supposed to bring inside. The smell of breakfast sandwiches from the cafeteria still lingered in the air. It felt like any other day at Brookwood Middle School. But for one student, the day was about to change in a way she didn't expect. Amara Lewis walked through the hall, her backpack neatly packed and her hair styled in long, shiny braids that her mother had done over the weekend. She was proud of them. They were neat, beautiful, and made her feel confident. Her mother always told her, "Your hair is your crown. Wear it proudly." And that's exactly what Amara did. She was quiet most of the time, not shy exactly, but someone who didn't like unnecessary drama. Her friends said she was the kind of person who stayed calm even when things got messy. She loved drawing, reading adventure stories, and was really good at science. As she walked into her first class, she noticed a few kids whispering and giggling near the back. It wasn't new. Sometimes people stared at her hair, curious or jealous, she never knew which. She took her seat near the window, unpacked her notebook, and waited for class to start. That's when Ethan Parker walked in. Ethan was known for being loud. He was one of those boys who always needed attention. He wasn't exactly mean all the time, but he liked to joke, even when the joke wasn't funny. His friends usually laughed at whatever he said, even when it was at someone else's expense. As soon as he saw Amara sitting quietly, he smirked. "Nice ropes, Amara," he said under his breath, loud enough for his friends to hear. They chuckled, and one of them added, "Bet she could swing from the ceiling with those." Amara ignored them. She'd learned long ago that some people didn't deserve her energy. She focused on her notebook, drawing small flowers in the corner of the page. But ignoring them only made Ethan want more attention. He leaned over to one of his friends and whispered something, and they both laughed again. The teacher hadn't come in yet, so the noise level rose quickly. Amara could feel them watching her, but she kept calm. Her heart beat a little faster, though. She didn't want trouble. She just wanted the class to start. When the teacher finally entered the room, the students quickly straightened up. For a while, everything seemed fine. The lesson started, and Amara relaxed a bit. She even began taking notes again, losing herself in the rhythm of the teacher's voice. But as the class went on, Ethan started getting restless. He kept tapping his pencil on the desk and whispering to his friends. Every time the teacher turned to write something on the board, Ethan's grin widened as if he was planning something. When the teacher announced group work, the students quickly moved their desks together. Amara was placed in a group with two girls she liked and, unfortunately, Ethan. She sighed quietly. Their task was simple, to create a small poster about climate change. Amara immediately started sketching ideas for the poster, trying to focus on the project. The girls helped by writing facts from the textbook. Ethan, however, didn't do much. He leaned back, spinning his pencil and cracking jokes. "Come on, Ethan," one of the girls said. "We're almost done. Just help color something." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Relax, it's not like this is going to be graded seriously." Then his eyes shifted toward Amara's braids again. He tilted his head as if an idea had just formed. A stupid one. Amara felt him move behind her, but she thought he was just grabbing a marker from the box on the back table. She kept drawing, focused on the poster. She didn't notice that he had picked up a pair of scissors from the supply tray. It happened so fast no one saw it coming. A quick snip, followed by gasps. Amara froze. She felt something light fall over her shoulder. When she turned, she saw it. A small section of her braid, cut clean and lying on the floor. Her heart dropped. For a moment, no one spoke. The entire group went silent. Ethan's grin disappeared almost instantly when he saw the shock on Amara's face. "What did you just do?" one of the girls whispered, her eyes wide. Ethan's smirk faltered. "It's just a joke," he muttered, though even he didn't sound convinced. Amara stood up slowly, her hands shaking. "You cut my hair?" she said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried enough strength that everyone nearby heard. The other students turned, realizing what had happened. The teacher, noticing the sudden silence, looked up from her desk. "What's going on over there?" she asked. Ethan's face turned pale. "Nothing, ma'am. We were just—" But the girl beside him interrupted. "He cut Amara's hair." The teacher's expression changed immediately. "Ethan Parker, come here right now." Amara's chest felt heavy. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, the stares, the whispers, the pity. Her throat tightened. She wanted to disappear. Ethan was taken to the front of the room, stammering excuses, but the teacher wasn't having any of it. "That's not a joke," she said firmly. "You will go to the office right now, and we'll be calling your parents." As he walked out of the room, the weight of what he'd done began to sink in. His friends looked away. No one was laughing anymore. Amara sat down again, trying to hold back tears. She touched the spot where the braid had been. It wasn't a big piece, but it wasn't small either. Her mother had spent hours doing her hair that weekend. She could still remember the warm smell of hair oil, the gentle pull of her mother's fingers, the way they had laughed and talked about her favorite show. Now, part of that was gone, and because someone thought it would be funny. Her friend beside her whispered softly, "Are you okay?" Amara nodded, though she wasn't sure if she really was. The teacher came over, knelt beside her desk, and said gently, "We'll take care of this. You didn't do anything wrong, okay?" Amara nodded again, keeping her voice steady. "I just want to go to the nurse, please." The teacher nodded and walked her out of the room. As they passed through the hallway, Amara kept her head down. Some students passing by looked at her curiously, but she didn't meet their eyes. When she got to the nurse's office, she finally let herself breathe. The nurse was kind. She didn't ask too many questions. She just said softly, "That shouldn't have happened to you, sweetheart," and handed her a tissue. While the nurse called the principal, Amara sat quietly, trying to collect her thoughts. She wasn't angry, not yet. Mostly she felt hurt. It wasn't just about the hair. It was about respect. About how easily someone could take something from her just to make others laugh. In the principal's office, Ethan sat across from the principal's desk, eyes down, fidgeting. The shock had fully set in. He wasn't laughing anymore. The principal spoke to him in a calm but serious voice about respect, personal boundaries, and consequences. Ethan tried to explain, "I didn't mean to hurt her," but the words sounded weak even to him. Meanwhile, the principal called Amara's mother. When she arrived at the school, she went straight to her daughter, wrapping her arms around her tightly. "Are you okay, baby?" she whispered. Amara nodded, but tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "He cut my braid, Mom," she said softly. Her mother's voice stayed calm, but her eyes were full of emotion. "We'll make this right," she said. "You didn't deserve that." They sat together while the principal explained what had happened. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a small clock on the wall. Ethan's mother arrived shortly after, and when she heard what her son had done, her face turned pale. She looked at Amara and said softly, "I'm so sorry. He knows better than that." Ethan kept his eyes on the floor, unable to speak. He had thought it was just a joke. But now, sitting there with both mothers watching, the truth hit him. It wasn't funny. It was cruel. When Amara and her mother left the school that afternoon, the sun was still shining, but the day didn't feel bright anymore. Amara held her mother's hand tightly as they walked to the car. Her mother looked down at her and said, "You're strong, Amara. Don't let anyone make you feel small." "You hear me?" Amara nodded quietly. She didn't say much on the ride home, just looked out the window thinking about everything that had happened. The sound of the scissors, the laughter, the silence afterward. It all played in her mind over and over. That night, when she sat in her room, her mother came in with a warm comb and a small container of hair cream. She began fixing the cut braid gently, humming softly. The same tune she always hummed when braiding Amara's hair as a little girl. Amara didn't cry anymore. She just sat there calm and quiet, letting her mother work. When they finished, her mother looked at her reflection in the mirror and smiled softly. "Still beautiful," she said. Amara smiled faintly. She didn't feel completely okay yet, but she knew something deep inside. She wasn't going to let this moment define her. The world could be unkind sometimes, but she had strength in her heart that couldn't be cut away. She didn't know it yet, but soon, the same boy who laughed at her would realize exactly how strong she really was. The next morning, the hallways of Brookwood Middle School felt different. The usual chatter and laughter were still there, but something had changed. Everyone seemed to know what had happened the day before. Whispers followed Amara as she walked to her locker. Some students looked at her with sympathy, others just with curiosity. Amara kept her eyes straight ahead. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to move on. But moving on wasn't as easy as she hoped. When she reached her locker, one of her close friends, Lila, walked up beside her. "Hey," she said softly, trying to sound casual. "How are you holding up?" Amara shrugged. "I'm fine," Lila frowned. "You don't look fine." Amara didn't respond. She just kept organizing her books, focusing on the sound of the locker door closing, anything to drown out the whispers around her. She knew people were talking. That's what middle school kids did. But knowing that didn't make it easier. A few lockers down, Ethan stood with his hands shoved into his pockets, his usual group around him. But today, the boys who used to laugh at his jokes weren't laughing. They weren't even talking much. Ethan looked uneasy. Every few seconds his eyes flicked toward Amara, but he quickly looked away when she noticed. It had been a long evening for him too. His mother had made him sit at the kitchen table after school and talk about what he'd done. She didn't yell, but the disappointment in her eyes had hurt more than any punishment could. She had made him write an apology letter, but he hadn't given it to Amara yet. He wasn't sure if she'd even want it. When the first class started, Amara sat quietly in the front row. She didn't say much, didn't raise her hand, didn't laugh at anything. Her mind kept replaying the sound of the scissors, that quick snip that had changed everything. Halfway through the lesson, the intercom crackled to life. "Amara Lewis and Ethan Parker, please report to the principal's office." The classroom went silent. Amara felt her stomach twist. She didn't want to go through it all again, but she stood up, gathered her things, and walked toward the door. Ethan followed, his steps slow and nervous. The walk to the principal's office felt longer than usual. Neither of them spoke. They could hear the buzz of other classrooms as they passed by, the faint hum of a vending machine, the sound of the secretary typing at the front desk. When they entered, the principal, Mrs. Grant, looked up from her papers. "Thank you for coming," she said in a calm voice. "Have a seat." Amara sat on one side of the small table. Ethan sat across from her, fidgeting with his sleeves. Mrs. Grant looked at both of them carefully before speaking. "Amara, I know this has been difficult," she began. "We've spoken with your mother, and the school has taken disciplinary action regarding what happened yesterday. But I also think it's important that both of you have a chance to talk, respectfully, so we can begin to move forward." Amara didn't say anything. She just looked at the table. Mrs. Grant turned to Ethan. "Ethan, I'd like you to speak first." Ethan swallowed hard. His voice was quiet when he started. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," he said. "I wasn't thinking. I thought it would be funny. It wasn't. It was stupid. I didn't mean to hurt you." The words hung in the air. They sounded honest, but also awkward, like he wasn't sure how to say them right. Amara finally looked up, her eyes calm but serious. "You didn't think before you did it," she said softly. "You just wanted everyone to laugh. You didn't care how I'd feel." Ethan nodded slowly. "You're right. I didn't think." Mrs. Grant leaned forward slightly. "Ethan, part of taking responsibility is understanding the harm you caused. This isn't just about hair. It's about respect." He nodded again. "I get that now. I really do." Amara's voice stayed steady. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I don't think I'll ever forget how that felt." The room went quiet again. Even Mrs. Grant didn't interrupt. After a moment, Ethan spoke again. "I wrote you something," he said, pulling out a folded paper from his pocket. "It's the apology letter my mom made me write. I didn't know if I should give it to you, but here." Amara looked at it for a long time before taking it. She didn't read it right away. She just held it in her hand, unsure what to feel. Mrs. Grant nodded approvingly. "That's a good start," she said. "Amara, you don't have to forgive him today, or ever, if you don't want to. But I do hope you'll let us help make things right for you." Amara nodded slowly. "I just want to feel normal again," she said quietly. "You will," Mrs. Grant replied kindly. "And we'll make sure of that." After the meeting, Amara returned to class, still quiet but feeling a little lighter. She wasn't ready to forgive Ethan, not yet, but it helped to say what she felt out loud. Sometimes silence made pain worse. Ethan, on the other hand, didn't feel lighter. He felt the weight of what he'd done even more. As he walked back to his locker later that day, he noticed people whispering about him too. Some kids looked at him with judgment, others with disappointment. His friends didn't tease anyone that day. In fact, they barely talked to him at all. During lunch, Ethan sat alone. His tray sat untouched while he stared at his food. He thought about Amara sitting with her friends at another table, laughing quietly at something Lila said. She looked more like herself again, calm and graceful. It made him realize how strong she really was. That afternoon, the principal called a short assembly for all 7th graders. She didn't mention names, but everyone knew why they were there. She talked about respect, kindness, and how small actions can deeply hurt others. Sometimes, Mrs. Grant said, standing at the front of the gym, a single careless act can change how someone feels about themselves. We all need to do better, to listen, to understand, and to treat each other with care. Amara sat in the crowd, listening quietly. She appreciated that the school was taking it seriously, but she still wished the whole thing had never happened. She didn't want to be known as the girl whose hair got cut. She just wanted to be Amara, the student who liked art and karate and science. After the assembly, a few classmates came up to her to show support. Some said they were sorry for what she went through. One girl even said, "You handled it better than I ever could have." Amara smiled politely, though inside she still felt mixed. It was nice to be supported, but she didn't want pity. She wanted respect. Later that evening, after dinner, she finally read Ethan's letter. His handwriting was messy, but the words were clear. "I was wrong. I didn't think about how it would make you feel. I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't funny. You didn't deserve that. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you don't. I'll do better." Amara folded the letter and placed it in her drawer. She wasn't sure if she'd ever forgive him, but she believed his apology was real. The next few days were quiet. Ethan stayed out of her way, and Amara slowly began to feel like herself again. She focused on her studies and karate practice after school. Every evening, she trained at the local dojo, where she could let go of her thoughts and focus on movement, balance, and strength. Her instructor, a calm older man who had known her since she was little, noticed her concentration. "You're pushing harder than usual," he said one evening. Amara nodded. "I just need to clear my head." He smiled gently. "Good. But remember, true strength isn't only in your hands or feet. It's in how you handle the things life throws at you." She nodded again, thinking about that all the way home. Meanwhile, at school, Ethan began volunteering to help in the library during lunch. Maybe he thought it would make things better, or maybe he just needed a break from the noise of the cafeteria. Either way, it was different for him, quieter, more thoughtful. One afternoon, when Amara went to return a book, she saw him there. He looked surprised but managed a small nod. "Hey," he said softly. "Thanks for not yelling at me that day." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Would it have helped?" He shook his head quickly. "No, I'm still sorry," Amara nodded. "I know." Then she turned to leave, but before she did, she said quietly, "You can't change what you did, but you can change what you do next." That night, Ethan thought about her words. He realized she was right. He couldn't undo what he'd done, but he could choose to be better from now on. And slowly, that change began to show. He stopped making jokes at other people's expense. He stood up when other kids teased someone. It didn't happen all at once, but over time, people noticed. Amara noticed too, though she didn't say anything. She just watched quietly, her calm expression never giving away much. By the end of the week, it felt like a small shift had begun at school. Not everything was perfect, but something about the atmosphere had changed. The teachers seemed more watchful, the students more aware. Maybe that was the silver lining. One person's bad decision had reminded everyone how powerful kindness could be. Amara didn't forgive Ethan fully yet, but she no longer felt angry when she saw him. She just felt certain that she had grown stronger. She didn't know it yet. But the next week would bring something that would surprise everyone, and show Ethan, once and for all, who Amara really was. The days after, the karate demonstration were different for everyone at Brookwood Middle School. What had started as a normal gym class turned into a moment nobody expected. When Amara stepped forward wearing her white karate uniform and tied that black belt around her waist, the whole gym went silent. Most of the students had no idea she practiced martial arts, and the ones who did never thought she was that good. Her movements were sharp, graceful, and full of control. Every kick, every block showed confidence. Not the kind of confidence that comes from showing off, but the quiet kind that comes from discipline. Even the teachers stood at the back watching in surprise. It wasn't just about her skill. It was about how calm she looked. Strong but peaceful, focused but humble. And somewhere near the back of the crowd stood Ethan, watching her with wide eyes. The same girl he once laughed at was now standing on the gym floor, bowing respectfully to her instructor, the same way real athletes did before a match. When she finished her short demonstration, the gym filled with applause. Some students cheered, others whispered to each other. Everyone was impressed. Amara bowed once more and gave a small smile. She didn't do it to prove anything to anyone. For her, karate wasn't about showing strength. It was about finding balance. But that day, whether she liked it or not, people finally saw her differently. After class, as students poured out of the gym, Ethan lingered behind. He kept glancing at her as she packed her bag. He wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time, he didn't feel confident or clever. He just felt guilty. Amara noticed him standing there but didn't say anything. She zipped her bag and walked toward the door. Just before she reached it, he finally spoke. "Hey, Amara," he said quietly. She stopped and turned slightly, waiting. "I didn't know you did karate," he said, his voice awkward. Amara gave a small nod. "I've been training since I was 7. He rubbed the back of his neck, trying to find his words. "You're really good. That was amazing." "Thanks," she said simply. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I meant what I said before, about being sorry. I know I already said it, but after seeing you today, I realize even more how wrong I was. You didn't deserve what I did, at all." Amara looked at him for a moment. There was no anger in her eyes now, just calm. "You already said sorry, Ethan," she said softly. "You don't need to keep saying it. Just make sure you don't treat anyone else the way you treated me." He nodded slowly. "I won't." For a few seconds, they just stood there, not as enemies, not as friends, but as two people finally beginning to understand each other. Then Amara smiled faintly, turned and walked away. That night, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her words. He had spent weeks feeling ashamed and awkward, but seeing her perform like that made him realize how strong she was, not just physically, but emotionally. He had tried to humiliate her, but she had turned that moment into something powerful. The next day at school, people were still talking about Amara's karate performance. A few kids who had teased her before were now asking questions like, "How long have you been training?" Or, "Can you teach us some moves?" She smiled politely, but she didn't brag. She just said it takes time and practice and went about her day. Ethan, meanwhile, stayed quiet. He didn't want to insert himself into the conversations. He didn't feel like he deserved to. During lunch, he sat alone again. But this time, he wasn't sulking. He was thinking. For the first time, he understood that being strong wasn't about making people fear you. It was about respecting them. After school, he saw Amara walking toward the gate with her backpack. He hesitated for a second, then ran to catch up. "Hey," he said, slightly out of breath. "Wait up." Amara slowed her steps, curious but not unkind. "What's up?" "I was wondering," he paused, "if maybe you could tell me more about karate. Not like moves or anything, just how you stay so calm all the time." Amara blinked, surprised by the question. "Why do you want to know?" He shrugged. "I guess I realized I'm not really good at that. I get carried away trying to make people laugh or trying to be the funny one. And then I just end up being the jerk." Amara looked at him thoughtfully. "Karate teaches you control," she said. "Not just of your body, but your mind. You learn to think before you act. You learn respect and for yourself and others." He nodded. "That sounds like something I need." She gave a small smile. "Maybe you do." Then she added, "You can come by the dojo sometime. My instructor teaches beginners classes on Saturdays." Ethan's eyes widened. "You'd actually let me come?" "Why not?" she said with a shrug. Everyone deserves a chance to change. That simple sentence stayed with him for days. The following weekend, Ethan showed up at the dojo. He felt nervous walking in, surrounded by people stretching, bowing, and practicing moves with focus and respect. He saw Amara across the room talking to her instructor. When she noticed him, she gave him a small nod, like a silent, "You're welcome here." He joined the beginner group, stumbling through his first warm-up, trying to mimic what the others were doing. The instructor was patient, guiding him gently through each step. Ethan felt awkward but strangely peaceful. For once, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just learning. After class, he sat on the bench, wiping sweat from his forehead. Amara walked over, smiling. "Not bad for your first day," he laughed. "I almost tripped twice." "Everyone does it first," she said. "It's not about being perfect. It's about getting better." He nodded. "Yeah, I think I needed this." "Good," she said simply. "Keep showing up. That's how you grow." Over the next few weeks, Ethan did just that. He started coming to the dojo every Saturday. Slowly, he began to change. His posture improved. He listened more and talked less. Even his teachers noticed the difference. One afternoon at school, during a group activity, another student accidentally knocked over Ethan's books. A few months ago, he would have snapped or made a sarcastic remark. But this time, he just smiled and said, "It's okay," as he helped pick them up. Amara saw the whole thing from across the room and smiled to herself. People really could change if they wanted to. Later that day, Ethan caught up with her at the lockers. "You know," he said, "my mom said she's proud of me lately. She said I seem calmer." Amara chuckled. "Maybe you're finally learning balance." "Maybe," he said, grinning. "And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you too. You handled everything way better than I ever could have." She looked at him, her expression warm. "Thanks, Ethan, but I didn't handle it for you." "I did it for me," he nodded. "Yeah, I get that now." The two of them stood there for a moment, an unexpected peace between them. They weren't close friends, but there was respect now. Something real. As weeks passed, the story about the haircut incident faded. New things happened at school, new rumors, new jokes. But for Amara and Ethan, that moment would always remain a turning point. One afternoon, their gym teacher announced an upcoming student showcase. The school wanted to highlight different talents: sports, music, dance, art, anything. Amara's name was already on the list for karate. To everyone's surprise, Ethan signed up too, not for comedy or sports, but to help her with a paired karate demonstration. When Amara found out, she laughed. "You sure about this?" He grinned nervously. "Hey, you said everyone deserves a chance to change. I'm just proving I took that seriously." They practiced together for 2 weeks, Amara teaching him basic moves and techniques. He wasn't perfect, and he stumbled often, but he worked hard. And more than that, he listened. The night of the showcase arrived. The gym was full again, parents, students, teachers. When it was their turn, the crowd watched in quiet awe. Amara led confidently. Ethan followed carefully. Their routine wasn't flawless, but it was full of teamwork and focus. At the end, when they bowed together, the applause was louder than anyone expected. It wasn't just for their performance, it was for what it represented: growth, forgiveness, respect. After the showcase, Ethan turned to Amara, smiling. "Guess I'm not such a bad student after all." Amara laughed softly. "You did good, Ethan," he grinned. "You know what? I think that's the best compliment I've ever gotten." They walked out of the gym together, not as enemies or even just classmates, but as two people who had learned something important about themselves and each other. Sometimes, the hardest lessons don't come from books or teachers, they come from mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes turn out to be the start of something better. That night, as Amara placed her karate belt on her shelf, she thought about how far she'd come. The hurt she once felt had turned into strength. The boy who once embarrassed her had become a symbol of change. And maybe, just maybe, life had a strange way of teaching lessons, not only to those who did wrong, but also to those strong enough to forgive. She smiled quietly to herself before turning off the light. The story that began with pain had ended in peace. And that, she thought, was the real victory. The weeks after the student showcase felt lighter, calmer. At Brookwood Middle School, the hallways were no longer buzzing with whispers about what had happened months ago. Slowly, the story of the haircut and the karate demonstration had shifted from embarrassment to inspiration. People had learned lessons, and some of those lessons were hard but meaningful. Amara returned to her routine with a quiet confidence. She walked through the hallways without looking down or worrying about what anyone thought. Her friends noticed a difference. She seemed calmer, stronger, and even more focused. But it wasn't just her skill in karate that made her stand out. It was the way she carried herself. She treated everyone with respect, even those who had made fun of her before. She didn't hold grudges. She just moved forward quietly, and that made her presence stronger than ever. Ethan had changed too. He had joined the beginner karate classes on Saturdays, as Amara had suggested, and it wasn't just about learning moves anymore. He was learning discipline, patience, and respect, not only for others but for himself. His friends at school noticed too. They began treating him differently, more carefully, because he had started listening instead of trying to impress them with jokes or attention-seeking stunts. One afternoon, as the final bell rang, Ethan noticed Amara walking out of the classroom, her backpack on her shoulders. He called out her name softly. "Hey, Amara," he said. She turned, slightly surprised but not upset. "Yes, I just wanted to say thanks," he said, looking down at his shoes, "for showing me, the right way to act. And for letting me come to the dojo. I'm learning a lot." Amara smiled faintly. "Good, that's all I wanted. To show that it's never too late to change." They walked together toward the school gates, not as friends, not as enemies, but as classmates who had learned something meaningful from each other. The silence between them was comfortable, a new kind of understanding that hadn't been there before. Over the next few weeks, the school principal, Mrs. Grant, organized a small discussion for 7th graders about respect, kindness, and the importance of standing up for yourself. She didn't mention names directly, but everyone knew the story that had inspired it. Amara agreed to speak. She didn't want to be the center of attention, but she wanted her classmates to understand something important. When the day arrived, she stood in front of the group, her back straight, her hands calmly folded in front of her. Her voice was soft but steady. "I want to talk about respect," she began. "It's easy to think that little things don't matter. A joke, a mean word, a careless action. But those little things can hurt someone more than you realize. You never know what someone is going through, or how much courage it takes for them to stand in front of you and keep their head high." Her classmates listened quietly. Some shifted in their seats, realizing that what they had laughed at or ignored could really hurt someone. "Being strong," Amara continued, "isn't about scaring people or making them feel small. It's about having respect for yourself and for others. And if someone makes a mistake, you can forgive them. Not because they always deserve it, but because it helps you grow. And it can help them grow too." There was a soft murmur of agreement in the room. Students who had been part of the whispers and jokes about the haircut incident were quiet, some nodding slightly. After the discussion, Ethan approached her. "That was really good," he said. "I don't think I could have said it like that." Amara shrugged lightly. "It's not about what I can say. It's about what everyone can learn from it." Ethan nodded, smiling faintly. "I'm glad you did it." The conversation stayed with him all day. He thought about the mistakes he had made and the lessons he had learned. He realized he had been lucky to have someone like Amara in his life. Someone who didn't fight back with anger. Someone who taught through strength and grace. That weekend, the local karate dojo organized a small community event to show what students had learned. Amara and Ethan decided to participate together. Amara would lead and Ethan would demonstrate a paired routine with her. The day of the event arrived and families, students, and teachers came to watch. The crowd was filled with excitement, curiosity, and support. When it was their turn, the lights focused on them and they began their routine. Amara moved with her usual precision, each kick, block, and stance controlled and confident. Ethan followed, sometimes stumbling slightly but improving with each step. The audience could see the effort, the dedication, and the teamwork. By the end, when they bowed together, the applause was loud and genuine. Afterwards, several students approached them, asking questions and complimenting their performance. Some said they had never realized how hard karate was or how much focus it required. Others said they were inspired by how well Ethan had improved so quickly. Amara smiled quietly, letting the praise pass over her. She didn't need recognition. What mattered was the growth, for herself and for others. Ethan, on the other hand, felt proud in a way he had never felt before. Not because of applause or attention, but because he had worked hard, learned humility, and earned respect. And he had learned that change was possible, even for someone like him. Weeks turned into months, and the story of the haircut incident gradually became less about embarrassment and more about lessons learned. Teachers occasionally referenced it in discussions about respect and kindness. Students who had been on the sidelines during the incident learned to stand up for each other, and both Amara and Ethan carried the experience with them quietly, as a reminder of how important actions, choices, and respect could be. One afternoon, as Amara sat in the library working on a school project, Ethan approached her with a small smile. "Hey," he said. "I just wanted to let you know. I'm glad things turned out like this. And I'm glad I met you." Amara looked up from her work. "I'm glad too," she said softly. "But remember, it's not about me. It's about learning how to be better." "I know," he said, sitting down across from her. "And I'm trying." For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt that he was finally on the right path. No more jokes at someone else's expense. No more trying to look cool at the cost of others. He had learned something far more valuable: respect, patience, and understanding. Amara continued to grow as well. Karate remained an important part of her life, but so did her focus on school, friends, and helping others. She had discovered that true strength was never about fighting or showing off. It was about having the courage to face life's challenges, the patience to forgive, and the wisdom to guide others toward better choices. The school noticed a subtle change in the environment. Students seemed more aware of their words and actions. There was less teasing and more support. Small moments of kindness began to appear in the hallways. Someone helping pick up a dropped notebook, another student offering to share supplies, a group quietly including someone who often felt left out. All of these little changes were connected in part to the story that had begun with a simple act of cruelty, but ended in understanding and growth. Amara's parents were proud of her. Of course, but not just for her karate skills or for the way she handled the situation. They were proud of her character, her ability to face hurt with courage, and her determination to make the world a little better, one small choice at a time. Ethan's parents were proud too. They had worried about him, feared he would continue on a path of careless behavior. But now they saw the transformation. He had learned responsibility, humility, and the importance of considering others' feelings. The two students continued their lives at Brookwood Middle School, no longer defined by a single incident, but by the lessons they had learned from it. Amara knew that life would continue to test her, but she also knew that she had the strength to face challenges with dignity and grace. Ethan understood that mistakes didn't have to define someone forever. Change was possible if you worked for it. In the end, the story of the haircut, the apology, and the karate demonstration became more than just a story about one day. It became a lesson about courage, respect, forgiveness, and the power of growth. Amara smiled to herself as she thought about how far she had come. She had turned a moment of hurt into strength, and that strength would carry her through anything life threw at her. And as she looked around her school, she saw the ripple effects of that moment, a small but powerful change in the hearts and minds of those around her. Sometimes life gave lessons in unexpected ways, and sometimes the most difficult moments could lead to the most meaningful victories. Amara had learned that strength wasn't just about skill. It was about heart, courage, and the willingness to rise above cruelty. And in that, she had won something far greater than she could have imagined. And as for Ethan, he had learned that respect and growth were far more important than jokes or popularity. That lesson would stay with him, shaping the way he lived his life from that day forward. In the quiet moments after school, when the halls were empty and the gym still echoed with laughter from practice, both of them knew, and in different ways, that they had changed. And that change would make the world a little better, starting with themselves.